Hello, it's James again, and I'm here with another how-to. This time, how to draft Dice Masters. In this video, we're going to take a look at what drafting in Dice Masters actually involves. I'm going to give you some top tips for drafting well. We'll then have a quick look at drafting older sets, and finally round off with a look at how to draft online. So without further ado, let's have at it. First, there were booster packs. And then came the Draft Pack. Each of these little beauties contains 12 character or action cards, 3 basic action cards, and 2 matching dice for each of the character or non-basic action cards. And WizKids have very kindly provided us with an entire webpage explaining how we're supposed to use these draft packs. But I'm going to save you a bit of time and summarise for you. First of all, before you start, you're going to need to gather together a few things that you probably already have. First up, you'll need a set of sidekick dice. You're not going to get very far without some of those. Next, you need some basic action dice, 2 sets of 3 in different colours, and ideally another 2 sets in case your first choice colours overlap with your opponent's. You should also have a matching basic action indicator card for each of those colours. And last but not least, you'll need a bag and perhaps also a playmat to make your playing experience more pleasurable. So once you've collected together those things and you've got your draft pack and you're raring to go, what do? Let's take a look. First of all, you need to open your pack and check that you have 2 matching dice for each card except the basic action cards. Next, put all your dice in the middle of the table with everyone else's arranged in a rainbow, as you can see in the picture. Then, probably a good idea to read through all of your cards so you have some idea what they do. And now you are ready to draft, and we're going to start drafting with the basic action cards. As I've said, there are 3 basic action cards in each draft pack, and you're going to draft these to the left, and I'll show you that now. So here are my 3, and I have to choose one of them. I'm going to choose Counter-Strike, okay? And then I will pass the other 2 to the person on my left, keeping hold of Counter-Strike and taking 2 new cards from the person on my right. Then, of course, I have to choose one of those. I'm going to choose True Believer, and I'm going to get rid of Poker Knight by passing that to the person on my left. And then, all being well, there should be one more card from the person on my right, which is Pizza. No choices here, so I have to keep that. And that gives me 3 basic action cards from which I will ultimately choose 2. Next, we're going to draft the 12 character and non-basic action cards. Although I should say that in Infinity Gauntlet there are no non-basic action cards, so it's just 12 characters that we're going to draft, and we're going to do that to the right. So here are my 12 cards, and I'm going to have to choose one of those, and I think I would be a fool to pass up on the rare Spider-Man. So let's take that one and pass the other 11 to the person on my right. Put that to one side, and we will get, in turn, 11 cards from the person on our left. Now we have to choose one more. Our favourite from this will be, I think, Ms. Marvel. So we'll take that one and pass the remaining 10 cards to the person on my right, and in turn we will receive 10 cards from the person on my left. And we're going to keep doing that until we have finally 12 character and non-basic action cards, and obviously the 3 basic action cards that we chose earlier. And then it's time to make a team. First of all, we'll choose 2 basic action cards, and then we'll grab 2 dice for each of our other cards from the rainbow and choose up to 8 of the cards with up to 20 dice for our team. I'll just very quickly talk you through my choices. For the basic actions, I've got 2 nice cheap ones, Counter-Strike and True Believer. Counter-Strike for the global, for a bit of ramp, and True Believer for buffing my characters, because my main plan is to attack with lots of Ms. Marvel dice. She's a cheap die with extremely good stats, and to help her out I've got the Spot, which prevents the opponent from blocking if he energizes, and Spider-Man, which spins dice down, so it might work as good removal. I should point out that I've got 6 dice on Ms. Marvel, although her max is actually 4, but that's okay because this is a draft and max dice counts don't matter, except that you must not exceed a total of 20. not including sidekicks and basic action dice. Apart from my main 3 and my basic actions, I've got to say the rest of it is a little bit of filler. I've got 2 cards which both give buffs because I'm going to be attacking, so I suppose the buffs might be helpful. If I thought it imprudent to have 2 buffs, I could just leave one of them off and roll with 7 cards and it wouldn't matter. I have to have up to 8 cards, but I don't have to have exactly 8 cards. And then I've got Iron Man, who's a bit rubbish, and I've got a couple of expensive ones because they'll always come around at the end. Healer doesn't really do much for me, but she's got some nice stats in case all of my other dice roll to energy and I have to buy something expensive. And the same could be said for Thanos, I should think, but he doesn't have Overcrush, which is a little bit of a disappointment. Okay, so you're drafting and you've got a handful of cards and you have to choose one of them. What kind of criteria can you apply to help you make that decision? Well, the first one is whether you need to fill a space in your collection. I don't think we need to say much more about that. So let's move on to win condition. Obviously, you're going to need something to kill your opponent with. And typically in Dice Masters, that might take one of a number of forms. It might be direct damage, like this Ghost Rider, which is like sort of lobbing howitzer shells over the wall. Or it might be Overcrush, the battering ram of Overcrush. It might be unblockable characters like assassins sneaking round the line. We don't have too much of that in Infinity Gauntlet, but this Kang sort of does the job. And Spot that I put on my team does too. And then lastly, you might just try and wipe their field out, or at least reduce it, using things like Rocket Raccoon or the Spider-Man that I had in my team. And if you're going for that sort of field clear strategy, obviously you're going to need a beat stick like the Ms. Marvel that I chose. The next really important consideration is your purchase curve. And if you look at my team, you can see that I have some 2 costs, 3 costs, some 4 costs, 5 costs, a 6 cost, and a 7 cost. Of course, it doesn't always work out that perfectly. And in fact, I probably won't buy anywhere near all of those dice. But it is really important to have a diversity of energy costs on your team, especially at the cheap end. Because, you know, you roll 4 dice every turn, so you might think, oh, well, I've got 4 energy. But you're not always going to have 4 energy, because clearly sometimes you're going to be fielding dice, paying fielding costs, paying for globals. And so sometimes you're only going to have 2 or 3 energy available to you. So it's really important to have those cheap dice. And at the other end, as I mentioned, it's quite important to have like some big characters that cost 6 and 7 that really do some damage for when you roll all of your cheap characters to energy and you have a pile to spend. Okay, so once we've filled the holes in our collection, we've got ourselves a win con and some cheap dice. There are a variety of other considerations, and I've lumped several of the important ones together under ramp, control, and utility. I'll give you some examples. Ramp might be in the form of globals, like the Villains Pack Global, or it might be on character cards like Captain Marvel. She's got a great ability, but she's pretty expensive. You might also include discounts as being very closely associated to ramp, with Proxima Midnights and perhaps the Thor Global for action dice. In addition to those kind of things, we've also got control elements like Angela and utility cards like Pumps on the Bullseye that you saw earlier, and the Collector Global, which allows you to field a psychic die from your use pile. Okay, there's a few other things to consider, but they're not quite as important as the things that we've already talked about. There is, for example, availability of dice in the rainbow. For example, if you had to decide whether to draft Rare Gamora, you might want to have a look at the rainbow and see if there are some cheap Bolt dice available for you to take later. If not, you might want to leave her alone. Energy types is another thing. For example, if you wanted to use the Hulk Global, which is powered by fists, to pump up your uncommon overcrushing Spider-Man, you might at some point pick up a cheap Corvus Glaive. And finally, imagine that you've already drafted a bunch of juicy when fielded abilities and you see Uncommon Angela floating around. You might just snap her up to stop other people getting her. You have no intention of putting her on your team, but you don't want them stopping your when fielded abilities, and that's called hate drafting. It's a bit of an edge case. The flip side of that, in an older set like UXM, there was a really powerful global on the 2 of the Professor X cards, and you might just pass that on and not take it, knowing that other people would take it, and then you could use the global when you played against them without taking up the space in your team. Okay, hopefully you've got a pretty clear idea of how to draft with the new draft packs, but what about older sets? Well, let's have a quick look. There was in fact a version 1 draft pack before the current ones, and the only difference was that they had 2 basic action cards instead of 3. So you didn't tend to draft the basic actions, you just kept the 2 that came in your pack, and then you drafted the 12 character or non-basic action cards as normal. So not much difference there. The original gangster of the drafting world was in fact the Gravity Feed with its 90 boosters, or 60 if it's AVX, and each of those boosters had 2 cards, and each of those cards had 1 matching die. And this is how we used to do it back in the day, and it was a lot of fun. And WizKids also have a page for this. This is the Dice Masters Rainbow Draft as opposed to the double Rainbow Draft format. This is single because each card has 1 matching die, whereas with the draft packs each card has 2 matching dice. The process is pretty similar, but since there are no basic action cards to draft, you have to bring your own, and you choose them after the draft. And instead of a draft pack, you open 2 piles of 6 boosters. So you end up with 2 piles of 12 cards. You keep them separate and draft the first pile to the right and the second pile to the left. That means you get 2 first picks. Yay! By the end of it, you'll have 24 cards to make your team from, which is twice as many as with draft packs, though you'll probably want to draft multiple copies of characters with a low purchase cost, like I did with Ms. Marvel, so that you get enough cheap dice, because you only get 1 for each card, remember. So, if you see some cheap Gravity Feeds hanging around, definitely give this type of drafting a go. It's a great experience and a little bit different from that of draft packs. Finally, we have campaign boxes and team packs, which were definitely not made for drafting of all of the Dice Masters product, but people wanted it, so they made it work. You just have to make sure that you have 1 die for each of the cards that you are drafting. But it does work. And to help you do that, you can even use the next thing that I want to talk about, which is Truby's online draft pack generator. Woo! You can find this on the Dice Coalition website under Tools, as you can see. And if you click on that, you can choose what sets you want to use. I've chosen Justice and the Mystics and Doom Patrol team packs, along with the basic actions from Justice. You can choose the number of players, then click on Get Packs, and it will generate actual draft packs for you and the other people who are playing. Then you click on Create Draft Room, and you can go through the whole process of drafting online. It's amazing. I think we probably need another video to do this justice, but please do go and check it out. Also, don't forget to check out our website, dmunited.eu. We have the best how to play articles in the business, weekly online tournaments, videos, dice mats, custom cards, reviews, and more besides. Okay, I hope that was useful. Please like, subscribe, and share. And if you have any questions, please do let me know in the comments. Bye-bye.